Thanks for joining us on Life Journeys, a podcast about thriving through the worst pain that life brings. With global initiatives threatening big changes to our way of life, we're going to need to activate Jesus' words about mountain-moving faith. Words that work is the ongoing series on Life Journeys that is rooted in releasing revelational words of faith that will work every time and with everyone. It's about moving the mountains that keep us from the presence and goodness of God. It's about defining our life purpose and identity through encountering Him until we have the power to move the obstacles that are destroying our liberty and hope.
When K.K. John, a renowned international minister, was lying in bed awaiting a heart transplant, he asked God yet again to heal him instead. God's reply came quickly. "Don't tell me how to heal you. Any fool can trust me, but can I trust you?" I'm talking today about the question nobody wants to ask. There's a verse tucked into the middle of Hebrews chapter 11 that most Bible teachers skip past quickly. They have to. It's too uncomfortable to linger there. These all died in faith, not having received the promises. These all died, not having received. I'm a minister. I've been a minister for most of my adult life, and I have chronic fatigue syndrome. I want to stay with that for a moment, because I think the combination matters. The calling and the condition, the faith and the unanswered prayer, the decades of preaching about the power of God and the body that still stubbornly, persistently does not cooperate. This podcast is my attempt to work something out, not to perform certainty I do not possess, not to give you the polished answer, but to actually go deep into Hebrews 11 and ask, what does it mean to die in faith? What does it mean to live in faith when the thing you've been believing for has still, after years, after decades, not arrived? That's the question I'm living inside of. Maybe you are too. Let's go in together. What actually is faith? Hint, it's not what you think. Hebrews 11 verse 1. The verse everybody memorizes. The verse that gets embroidered on pillows and printed on bookmarks. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. We read it so fast. We've heard it so many times. Let me slow it down. Substance. That word stopped me. Not the feeling of things hoped for, not the wish for things hoped for. The substance. The Greek word is hypostasis. It means the underlying reality, the actual foundation. Faith isn't a warm sentiment about future possibilities. The writer is saying faith has the same ontological weight as the thing it's reaching for. But here's the catch, and this is crucial. Hope must be qualified. Biblical hope is not wishful thinking with a Christian label slapped on it. You cannot simply want something very badly, call it faith, and expect God to be obligated. Hope, in the biblical sense, carries an absolute certainty, and that certainty cannot be separated from patience, a word the New Testament uses not to describe gritted teeth endurance, but a supernatural, God-given capacity to wait without unraveling. Hope without patience rots. It turns into anxiety, then into fear, then into a quiet, corrosive despair that looks, from the outside, an awful lot like depression. I know, because I've watched it happen in my own soul. Now, evidence. Faith is the evidence of things not seen. That word evidence is doing real work. It means proof, testimony, the kind of verification that holds up in court. Let me take a detour into science for a moment because I think it illuminates this beautifully. Right now, as you listen to this, your eyes are processing light. Photons are bouncing off surfaces, entering through your lenses, striking rods and cones in your retinas, firing signals down your optic nerve, and your brain is constructing, assembling, translating what you experience as sight. What you see is not raw reality. It's your brain's best rendering of a very narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum. Radio waves are passing through your body right now. Television signals, infrared radiation, none of it visible to you, none of it detectable by your five senses, and yet it is all absolutely, measurably, instrumentally real. Faith is a faculty, a perceptual instrument. It apprehends frequencies of reality that the physical senses were never designed to detect. And here is the staggering claim of Hebrews 11, verse 3. The visible world was made from invisible things. The material universe is downstream of a spoken, unseen, word-generated reality, which means the invisible is not less real than the visible. It is more foundational, more enduring, more trustworthy. Your five senses are the instruments you use to navigate a temporary world. Faith is the instrument you use to navigate an eternal one. Let's look at the heart that can hold it. Faith cannot be manufactured. I need to say that clearly, because a lot of Christian teaching, well-intentioned, earnest Christian teaching, implies the opposite. If you study hard enough, confess long enough, discipline yourself sufficiently, faith will come. It won't. Not like that. Faith is relational. It arises within a relationship, a specific kind of relationship, with a specific quality. And the quality God is looking for might surprise you. It's not theological precision. It's not ministry productivity. It's not the absence of doubt or the presence of certainty. It's humility, a willingness to be treated the way Jesus was treated, a heart that allows love to grow through the trial rather than demanding the trial be removed before love can operate, a soul that submits to God's refining process rather than becoming bitter under it. Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, describes the people who can see God, the pure in heart, the meek, the merciful, those who mourn, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. We've turned the Beatitudes into a list of moral achievements, but I think they're something more diagnostic than that. They're a description of the kind of inner posture through which faith can actually grow. The parable about sowing seed makes the same point from a different angle. The seed is the same in every case. What differs is the soil: rocky ground, shallow earth, thorny land, good soil, and Jesus names the thorns, specifically the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches. Not gross sin, not obvious rebellion, just preoccupation, the cluttered, distracted, anxious heart that is always doing something other than actually listening to God. I've been that soil. I suspect most of us have. The question isn't whether you have enough faith to move God. Please hear me on this. That is the wrong question, and it will crush you. The right question is whether you have enough faith to move yourself, to please God, to seek God, to orient your entire inner being toward God. Because when you seek God diligently, when you actually find him, he becomes your God. Yours personally, established, ratified, specific to your life and your need, and then everything else follows from that. Noah wasn't afraid of the rain. I've preached this for years. Noah wasn't afraid of the rain. What was Noah's faith actually about? Not that he believed in meteorological events, not that he believed the water would rise. His faith was about trusting what God said enough to act on it completely, in full view of a world that thought he had lost his mind. He didn't spend his days cataloging the moral failures of his neighbors. He just built quietly, obediently, steadily. And in doing so, he condemned the world around him, not with arguments, not with outrage, with the silent, patient testimony of faithful action. I think about this. I have thought about this a great deal. In seasons when the country felt like it was burning, when social media was a torrent of alarm and fury, and I found myself a minister, a man of God, experiencing something I can only call terror. Not for myself, for my children, my grandchildren, for the world they would inhabit. And then I had to ask myself honestly, is this fear sanctified? Is this alarm the prompting of the Spirit? Or is it the opposite of faith? Am I, in my alarm, fighting against what God may have sovereignly purposed for this age? Noah didn't know the end from the beginning either. He just knew what God told him to do. That's still the call. Do what God told you to do. Build what He asked you to build. Live the way He asked you to live. Let the testimony of your faithfulness be your statement to the age. The world will not be condemned by our righteous anger. It will be condemned or reached by our righteous lives. See Abraham, the man who obeyed without a map. He went out not knowing where he was going. That single sentence from Hebrews 11 is, I think, the most accurate description of genuine faith I have ever read. Not knowing where he was going. The destination was not in hand. The route was not revealed. The logistics were entirely unresolved. And he went. I am in some ways an Abraham sort of person. I don't say that with pride. I've made enough mistakes along the way to cure me of most of my spiritual vanity. But the pattern resonates. I answered a call that made no financial sense. I left security for uncertainty. I traveled across this country with a tent and a belief that God was going to move. And I stood in empty fields and nearly empty chairs, night after night, and preached as if the front row was full. The tent was not always full, not even close. I went to Russia. Later, I started a church with no guaranteed support. I lived in conditions that, if I described them in detail, would make you wince. I was taken to court. I had rocks thrown at the roof during services. I was run out of auditoriums. I have experienced the particular grinding ache of believing that God promised something and watching the years pass without it arriving. And Abraham lived in tents for years in a country that wasn't his. The Bible says he was looking for a city whose builder and maker is God. He wasn't building that city himself. He wasn't even quite sure where it was. He was just looking, moving, trusting. He never received the promise in full, and yet God called his faith righteousness. Then comes the offering of Isaac, the son, the promised son, the specific, miraculous, waited-for son, the one everything depended on. Take him and offer him. I have read that passage hundreds of times. It still shocks me. But what I've come to understand, slowly and painfully, is this. The test was not merely about whether Abraham would sacrifice Isaac. The test was about whether Abraham would sacrifice his need to be right, the requirement to fear God more than his own way. his carefully constructed understanding of who God was and what God had promised, his theological system, his ministry dreams. "Now I know," God said when Abraham raised the knife. "Now I know that you fear me." Not when Abraham believed the promise, not when he walked out of Haran, not even when Isaac was born. Now, when he laid the most precious thing on the altar. Faith is proven not in what it receives. It's proven in what it surrenders. That's where we'll leave it for today. 4 figures. 4 ways of going forward without a map. We've only scratched the surface of this chapter. In the next episode, we're going to go to the place Hebrews 11 takes us that most sermons don't. The people who didn't get the miracle. The ones who died in caves. The ones of whom the world was not worthy. I have something personal to say about that, and I think you might too.
You can unlock the presence of God in your life. There are revelation principles that remove the mountains, keeping us from joy, hope, peace, and purpose when our world gets turned upside down. Look for these words that work with Pastor Hardika as he shares what has helped him when life got hard. And don't forget to check out his book, The Fortress and the Firebrand, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Thanks for listening to Life Journeys.
Do I have enough faith to move God? Please hear me on this. That wrong question will crush you. The right question is whether you have enough faith to move yourself. Faith is proven not in what it receives, but what it surrenders. It allows love to grow through the trial rather than demanding the trial be removed.